Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Life Sciences by Dumiselani. We are continuing from lesson 4. This is part 2, a separate video on the lesson about the negative feedback of TSH as well as thyroxin. I decided to do a separate video just to avoid a lengthy video. So these are exam type questions, assessment that is based on lesson 4. The video is uploaded. It is just the previous video on the lesson series on the endocrine system as well as homeostasis. Okay, so if you need an in-depth lesson, please go back to the previous video. On this particular video, we are just going to be doing exam type questions. Let's get right into it. Okay, now here is a general question, okay, that involves 2 sub-questions. The first one says define negative feedback mechanism for 2 marks, okay. So negative feedback mechanism is a mechanism in the human body that detects changes, remember, I said negative feedback includes 2 components. So when there is a change in the internal environment of the body, there should be a detection of the change or an imbalance in the internal environment and restores balance. Okay, so negative feedback, the definition involves the detection of any change in the internal body or the internal environment and restoration of balance. The second question, describe how the human body restores thyroxin concentration in the blood when it rises. Guys, rises above normal. In the previous video, I have shown you how this happens. So here, I'm just going to be walking through the response very quickly. Thyroxin levels increase above normal, limits causing of the pituitary gland to produce less TSH. So the pituitary gland is stimulated and it releases or secretes less TSH. Low levels of TSH inhibits stimulation. Remember, the word inhibit means what? Prevents. Of the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland secretes less thyroxin and thyroxin levels decreases. In the blood, thyroxin returns to normal. So there are many ways of contextualizing this response. As you see, on this memorandum, it is contextualized differently. However, okay, it is contextualized differently from how I contextualized it in the previous lesson. Remember, the key is not to cram in this instance. The key is to understand the work. Okay, to understand the work and put it in your own words without changing the facts of the context. So when we have too much thyroxin, the key is when we have too much thyroxin. First thing is that what will detect is the pituitary. It's the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, okay, and then it will secrete less TSH. And then when we have less TSH, it means that the thyroid gland will secrete less thyroxin Okay. When the pituitary gland secretes less thyroxin, thyroxin levels drop or decrease. When the thyroxin levels decrease because we had too much thyroxin, the thyroxin levels will decrease back to normal. Okay, I'm not going to be repeating most of the things because we have already covered it in the previous video. Okay, now here we are moving on. Okay, here on this slide, these are the general typical type of questions that you may get in the exam. Let us go on to the following slide or the following activities to look at more contextual answers. I mean contextual questions and contextual answers. All right, activity 8. Question. The diagram below represents the interaction between two important endocrine glands. Okay? The gland labeled A is found at the base of the brain, while the gland labeled C is present towards the front of the neck. Okay, now what are these glands? Let's look at the glands first. So the gland A at the base of the brain, we know as the pituitary Okay, there's something wrong with my pen. It's known as the pituitary gland. Okay, now the pituitary gland, there in the neck area, we have our thyroid gland. Thyroid gland. Okay, now the pituitary gland secretes many hormones. Okay, now remember that the pituitary gland secretes LH, FSH, it secretes prolactin, which are the reproductive hormones in females. Now, it also secretes thyroxin, okay? It also secretes, what else does it secrete? It also secretes ADH. However, let us look at the interaction in this instance. Now, the pituitary gland, as you can see, is secreting a hormone that is going to the target organ, which is what? Which is the thyroid gland that is found on the neck area. Okay, now which hormone that is secreted by the pituitary gland goes to the thyroid gland? That hormone is known as TSH. That is the hormone that will act on the thyroid gland, the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, guys? Now, what is the function of the thyroid stimulating hormone? Let's just remind ourselves. The thyroid stimulating hormone, the function of the thyroid stimulating hormone, it's in its name. It stimulates or causes the thyroid gland to secrete or release thyroxin. Okay, so TSH stimulates the thyroid gland which is gland C there. Stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete Thyroxin. Thyroxin. Stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxin. Okay, guys? Now, what is the function of the thyroid gland? The thyroid gland secretes thyroxin. The thyroid gland secretes thyroxin. Now, the thyroid gland cannot secrete thyroxin on its own. Okay? What stimulates it to secrete thyroxin is TSH. So, when we look at this question, when we look at this diagram rather, we see that there is an arrow that is going down to the thyroid gland that represents a hormone. Okay, now, when we have too much thyroxin, which is secreted by the thyroid gland, look at this arrow. So D is a hormone, and this hormone is thyroxin. This hormone is thyroxin. When we have too much thyroxin, that will inform the pituitary gland that we have too much thyroxin. Okay? So the pituitary gland will secrete less TSH. If we have less TSH, that will stimulate the thyroid gland to secrete less thyroxin. If we have too little thyroxin, which is hormone D, that will inform the pituitary gland that we have too little thyroxin, and the pituitary gland will secrete more TSH, which will travel to the thyroid gland to secrete more thyroxin. Okay. Sorry for that. Okay, so we said that gland A is the pituitary gland. It secretes hormone B, which is TSH, which travels to gland C, which is the thyroid gland, to stimulate it to secrete hormone D, which is thyroxin. Okay, so of course, question number 3.1.1 is going to be give the label for gland A. Gland. Your answer must be a gland, not a hormone, guys. It must be a gland. And what is the answer? The answer is the pituitary gland. Okay. Question 3.1.2 says name hormone B. Your answer must not be a gland. It must be a hormone. Very careful. Hormone B, we've already said, is the thyroid stimulating hormone, or you can abbreviate it to say TSH. That will also be correct. State two functions of hormone D. Hormone D. Okay? Hormone D, when we were studying the diagram, we said is thyroxin. So this question is not asking you for you to name the hormone. It is saying give the function or provide the function of hormone D, which is thyroxin. This is why it is important to study the diagram before looking at the questions. Okay, what is the answer? In the previous video, we've already discussed these two answers. Function number 1 controls basal metabolic rate, or you can say controls the rate of cellular respiration. That will be okay as well. Development of the nervous system, and improves heart and muscle function. So any two of these will be correct. Maximum is 2 because the marker location there is 2. Question 314. Describe the negative feedback mechanisms that operates when the levels of hormone D we've already said is thyroxin, is higher than normal in the blood for 5 marks. The response, like in the previous slide we said, or in the previous video we've also said, when thyroxin levels are above normal, the pituitary gland is stimulated, 1 mark. To secrete less TSH, 1 mark, which causes the thyroid gland, 1 mark, to secrete less thyroxin, 1 mark. Thyroxin levels decrease, 1 mark, back to normal. So that is our 5 marks. Okay, let's look at the following activity. Activity number 9. All right, we have a similar type question. Let's read the statement. The diagram below is of a negative feedback mechanism between 2 endocrine glands. They do not mention what the 2 endocrine glands of the body are. Okay, we have gland A and gland B. Okay, so gland A is at the base of the brain, and that is the pituitary. That is the pituitary gland. That is the pituitary gland. That is the pituitary gland. And then the pituitary gland, as we can see, secretes a hormone that travels to gland B. Gland B is the target organ. Now, what is gland B? As we can see by the shape of gland B. By the shape of gland B. It's an H type of shape or a butterfly wing type of shape. And gland B would be the thyroid gland. Gland B would be the thyroid gland. Okay, now like we said, the pituitary gland secretes many hormones, but the hormone that travels to the thyroid gland will be thyroid stimulating hormone, which is known as TSH. Okay, what is the function of TSH? TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete hormone 2. And then what is hormone 2 that is secreted by the thyroid gland? Hormone 2 would be thyroxin. Okay, guys? Remember, when too much thyroxin is secreted, that will inform the pituitary gland to secrete less TSH. When too little thyroxin is secreted, that will also inform the pituitary gland to start secreting more TSH. Okay, so that's why you see the dotted line leading back to the pituitary gland. Okay, guys, let's look at the questions. Identify gland labeled A. Gland. Your answer must be a gland, not a hormone, but a gland. And the answer is the pituitary gland. A hormone from gland A controls the secretion of a hormone from gland B. Okay? So a hormone from the pituitary gland, gland A, controls the secretion of a hormone in gland B. What does that mean? It means that the pituitary gland secretes TSH, and TSH causes the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxin. That's what it means. What is the question? With regards to the above, why is an under secretion of the hormone from gland A can lead to an increase in weight of a person. Under secretion of the hormone that is secreted by gland A. So an under secretion, when there's a lack of thyroxin, how can that contribute to a person having a weight gain? Now let's talk about the function of thyroxin with regards to weight. Remember what we said. We said that the function of thyroxin is to break down glucose. Thyroxin increases the breakdown of glucose into what? The breakdown of glucose to release energy. Still remember? So thyroxin stimulates the breakdown of glucose, and the breakdown of glucose will release energy in the form of ATP, and this is known as cellular respiration. Gosh, what is wrong with you, pen? Cellular respiration. Okay, so an undersecretion of thyroxin, means that less glucose will be broken down by the body cells. Okay, less glucose will be broken down by the body cells. Now, if we have less glucose broken down by the body cells, it means that the metabolic rate will be slower. Okay? Now, when glucose is not broken down, or when glucose is not metabolized, it means that the glucose will be stored, guys. Okay? We do not excrete or get rid of glucose. When it is not broken down due to this undersecretion of thyroxin, it means glucose will be stored. Now, when glucose is stored as glycogen, if you can remember from the previous lessons. It is stored as glycogen in the liver and in the skeletal muscles. Okay. Now, when too much glucose is not broken down, instead of storing glucose as glycogen, the body will store the glucose as adipose. And what is adipose? Again, adipose, fancy name meaning fat. Okay, now, when the glucose, due to the undersecretion of thyroxin, there will be less breaking down of glucose to release energy. Instead, glucose will be stored as fat. Okay, so when glucose is stored as fat, where is it stored? It is stored around your vital organs, like your kidneys and your heart, and it is also stored under the skin. So when glucose is not broken down to release energy, it will be stored first as glycogen, then stored as fat, and then the fat is stored around the organs and under the skin, and that will cause weight gain. Okay, so some people Sorry for that, guys. My dogs were making a lot of noise. So, like I was saying, some people, their weight gain is not due to constantly eating too much. It may be hormonal in the fact that there is less secretion of thyroxin. Like we said, when there's less thyroxin secreted, less glucose will be broken down, more glucose will be stored as fat, and that causes weight gain. Okay, now let us look at the answer to question 252. TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxin. Thyroxin controls basal metabolic rate. An undersecretion of thyroxin will cause a reduced metabolic rate or reduced cellular respiration, or you can say reduced breakdown of glucose. More glucose will be stored as fat instead of being used or broken down or burnt as a source of energy. So any 5 of those responses will suffice. Okay, let's look at them one by one again. TSH stimulates the thyroid gland. Wait. Yes. So we are talking about undersecretion of A. So TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxin. Thyroxin controls metabolic rate. Undersecretion of thyroxin will cause reduced metabolic metabolic rate, or here you can say reduced cellular respiration, or you can say will reduce the breakdown of glucose. That will be fine. More glucose will be stored as fat instead of being used, or instead of being burnt, or instead of being broken down as a source of energy. Okay, so that is the 5 marks. It means we need to move on to the next activity. Activity 10. I believe this is the last activity. I'm not sure. We will check. All right, let's read the instruction. The diagram below illustrates the homeostatic control of the pituitary gland or the hypophysis over the function of another endocrine gland in the human body. Study the diagram and answer the questions that follow. So this question is a bit more complicated visually. Why? Because it does not show the glands. So this is not a model of a human being. Okay? It means that you need an in-depth understanding of the negative feedback between TSH and thyroxin to be able to contextualize this. So it does not include a drawing, so it's a bit more complicated. Where do we even start? Okay, now let's start from the data that we are given. We are given that in this box, we have the pituitary gland. And then as we can see, as we know, the pituitary gland, in terms of the negative feedback between TSH and thyroxin, the pituitary gland secretes which hormone? It secretes TSH. It secretes TSH. Okay. TSH, as we can see, let's follow. Less of it will go to which gland? It means this gland is the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland. Okay. So hormone number 2, like we said, is TSH. So when it secretes less, when the pituitary gland secretes less TSH, the thyroid gland will secrete less what? Which hormone does the thyroid gland secrete? The thyroid gland secretes thyroxin. Less TSH, the thyroid gland secretes less thyroxin. And then if we have less thyroxin, that will inform the pituitary gland again, okay, to secrete more thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone is TSH. When we have more TSH, that will inform the thyroid gland again to secrete more thyroxin. So this activity requires for you to understand, or rather this diagram requires for you to understand the negative feedback between TSH and thyroxin. Okay, so if you get a question like this in the exam, sit down on your question paper, make scrap notes, write down in detail the negative feedback when there's too much thyroxin and when there's less thyroxin. Write it down in detail, and then after that, take some clues from the notes that you have done and then fill the information into the diagram. That will help you a lot. Okay, let's look at the questions. By which mechanism is homeostatic control achieved by the above process? This is a standard question, and the answer is negative feedback mechanism. The name of the mechanism is negative feedback mechanism. I have put the tick there next to negative feedback because the word mechanism is on the question. Okay, don't just write negative feedback to be safe. Write it in full. Negative feedback mechanism. Okay. 342, give labels for the gland numbered 1. Gland. Your answer must be a gland, guys, not a hormone. The clue is there on the question. Gland. And then we've already said that is the thyroid gland. And then hormone. Sub-question B, hormone numbered 2. Hormone numbered 2, there it is. The answer is thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. The clue was there. There is our clue over there. The same hormone that is produced more is the one that is produced less up there. Okay. Following question. Hormone numbered 3. Not a gland. Hormone numbered 3. This hormone numbered 3 is secreted by the gland 1. Therefore, it is thyroxin. Okay, what's going on? Thyroxin. And lastly, D, hormone numbered 4. Hormone numbered 4 is also secreted by gland 1, which is the thyroid gland over there. So that hormone is also thyroxin. Okay. Question 343. Name the nutrient required for the proper functioning of the part labeled 1. Part labeled 1, there, the thyroid gland. So the proper functioning of the thyroid gland depends on which nutrient, guys. Which nutrient? Underline your clues. And the nutrient is iodine. Okay, that is the last of the questions on this activity. Let me just check if there are any more. Okay, that was the last of the activities, ladies and gentlemen. It means that the next video will be lesson 5, and then lesson 5 will be based on the control of water levels in the blood as well as the control of salt levels in the blood. With that being said, see you on that video. Take care and goodbye.